Welcome everyone, I'm Tom Ryan with WPS, Government Health Administrators. I am part of the Provider Outreach and Education team. Today I'm joined by Jennifer from my team. She'll be my co-host today. We are here to talk about overpayments. So we want to get through a little bit on that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to try to clear up some of the understanding of overpayments. What happens is we take pre-submitted questions, and during those pre-submitted questions, we try to build a presentation based on that. I'm going to read you some of the questions as we go through. We're going to talk about defining overpayments, identifying overpayments, and returning money to get you a clear understanding of the overpayment process. One of the questions that we were asked very specifically is, why can't I contact your overpayments department? And that will be one that hopefully will become clear throughout this presentation. That's our primary goal. How do I get to contact? What do I do with this? Because our overpayment department is part of our financial services area, they handle overpayments, issue checks, all of those kinds of different things. For a Part A provider, they would do your cost reports, all of that would come in later. So we'll talk a little bit more about overpayments. As I promised, the first thing we're going to do is define overpayments. Let me just remind you, why am I defining overpayments? Well, we did have a bunch of different questions, and one of them is what's an overpayment is and how does it work through the process? So starting with that as the basic questions, and yes, I've combined the 7 or 8 other questions right into that one. It really want to answer that. We really want to make sure people do understand what is the overpayment, why does Medicare do it, and what's the process for it? Because that will also then drive who you contact. And let me explain that as we get a little bit more into this. Let's start with a really basic piece of information here. And this starts all the way back to what is an overpayment. First of all, this is from the Department of Health and Human Services, or DHHS. They are the section of the government under the president that runs Medicare, and they do this through the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So it's part of the executive branch, and they execute the process. The Department of Health and Human Services then says, hey, CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, you're going to run Medicare. CMS then contracts companies to do certain functions, and that's the Medicare administrative contractor, which is what we are. Our job is then to pay claims, but to monitor payments to make sure we're paying claims correctly, and to build system edits to take money back that isn't necessarily paid correctly, or to have a person manually enter that. That taking of the money back is what we define as an overpayment. Okay. The regulations do state that if a claim is not properly paid, it is an amount that is owed back to Medicare, and it is owed back to one of the trust funds. Therefore, it must be taken back as a debt owed to the federal government. That's a really high level basic definition. If you need more information, definitely drop that into the chat. We'll get that at the end. A little bit more to go on. I was asked again for some general information and a little bit more about determining why an overpayment occurs. So we built this slide in to kind of answer the why question. What causes this? First of all, there are processing and administrative errors. We use the processing and administrative errors to say, hey, sometimes Medicare, the system has an error, and that creates the overpayment. Other times a provider may actually submit something in error. And so when we get incorrectly submitted things, that's what this is all about. I can give you an example of this. We had an inpatient claim submitted for Mary Johnson, but the date of birth on Mary Johnson was wrong. It is Mary Johnson, that is the correct name. However, the Medicare beneficiary identifier or Medicare number for that patient was wrong because they had more than one. So that is an administrative error. It could be an incorrect coding, and this can be a provider identified error, WPS identified error. There are other contractors that will also medically review it, and they'll say, wait, your documentation says this should be coded as. Now, if you really want to think about it, think of an evaluation and management service, and that's 40% of all claims submitted to the multi-carrier system on a CMS 1500 or 837P transaction. And that coding can state very specifically, hey, if this isn't coded, then I'm going to give you a 99213 versus a 215 or a 214. So all of that would be incorrectly coding. That's just an example. There's a lot of other things that'll fall into it. Medical necessity errors, the service after review isn't medically necessary. And again, it can be WPS medical review or or a lot of other entities. Bundling is another reason that this happens. This is the one that will create what we call automated edits as well. Now, what is bundling? Okay, and we're going to talk more about this in a little while, so I'm going to hold on to that, but I really want you to put that in the back of your mind, and we'll talk about why that's important. Automated edits simply are what they are. If you want to think about this, think about the National Correct Coding Initiative edits, the procedure to procedure, the medically unlikely, and the add-on codes. They're just edits that are built into the system, and we'll talk more about those. Also, under the Social Security Act, Section 1862B, there is times when there has to be someone billed before Medicare who has to consider the claim. Now, I shouldn't say someone, it's not a person, it's an entity. That entity may be another insurance, that entity may be like a store or something for privately insured, but this is what we call primary payer, and you do have to follow that rule. Last, eligibility issues definitely arise. So we know that these are some basic categories. We're going to move through some of the top ones, which means what happened or where did it come from. So one of the top things that comes up is, can the patient, and this is an answer to the question, can the patient identify an overpayment? And the answer is absolutely. Sometimes the patient will say, hey, I never saw that provider. And this is done through 1-800-Medicare, or they can write into 1-800-Medicare. If they do, we may ask for your provider records. Do you know why? Well, we need to verify whether or not they actually saw you. Also, what service did you do? Sometimes they're never going to see you. For instance, you read an x-ray. Well, that patient may not know you, so they might say, I never saw that patient. We say, oh, wait, yeah, that makes sense because, so it just depends on what we get. Now, that is a referral from another contractor because the patient contacts the beneficiary call center, 1-800-Medicare. So they were then referred to us, and we have to do more to help them. So it's a little different than just saying, oh, it's automatically there. But there's one where you may get a record and you're like, I didn't do anything. I didn't request anything, and that's because the patient did. The patient can say that they paid the incorrect amount or they don't agree with the amount that you were paid. We'll look into it. Again, this may be a medical record request. We don't know that. And what we're looking for is, one, did you build a proper procedure code, the correct number of units, all of that type of thing. And so what we're really looking for is to make sure everything was done correctly. Same thing with services not provided. The patient can try to identify anything as an overpayment, and we are legally required to look into it. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to find for the patient or anything like that. It may mean that your medical record comes in and we're like, oh, all right. In which case, we would not open an overpayment. Other times, stuff may come in and we may open then an overpayment, which then starts a process for overpayments, and we'll talk more about that. So there's a lot that goes on with overpayments. Just keep all of that different stuff in mind. We were asked if, when we look at the contractors, who can identify? Now, this person is a little bit familiar, obviously, because they identified contractors. So one, your Medicare administrative contractor, in other words, us for J5 and J8, we can identify an overpayment. We can perform pre or post payment medical review and take back money. We can also perform pre and post payment medical review to stop payment before it's issued. So it really just depends on what we're doing. What type of medical review occurs? Prior authorization would be a prepayment, which would not create an overpayment because we wouldn't even be able to pay it. Targeted probe and educate during that process. The initial reviews are done post payments. And also, what about a level 1 appeal? that would also be a contractor identified through your Medicare administrative contractor. The level one appeal is called a redetermination, and you can ask us to look at the overpayment and whether you agree with it or not. That is one form of contact with overpayments, but it's actually with the medical staff to review whether or not that overpayment should stand. You're not asking whether it's valid or not. What you're saying is, I want to do an appeal. Here's the medical records to overturn that. The comprehensive error rate testing contractor can do the review, which creates the overpayment. They do not believe that it should be paid. They create the national paid claims error rate. When you want to do the contact with them, we do the initial take back, or we create the overpayment, which means that you go back to us to do that level one appeal. So your Medicare administrative contractor does the level one appeal. So when it relates to overpayments, even though another contractor created it, we're the ones that are going to do that review for you. And you do that through the appeals process. And I'll show that to you in just a moment. Then you've got the recovery audit contractor, very similar to the comprehensive error rate testing contractor, except that the comprehensive error rate testing is a random sample of claims. The recovery audit contractor is a targeted sample. They get an approved topic and go from that. Once they've identified an error, they indicate to us that we should issue an overpayment request. Once that overpayment request is issued, now you do need to come back to us to do the appeal. If you don't understand it, we'll talk more about that in just a little while. The qualified independent contractor, or the QUIC, is actually the one that follows us on the appeal process. So we always want to incorporate them. So we do a level one, which is a redetermination, and they do a level two, which is a reconsideration of the redetermination of the overpayment. Still looking for us to explain it and to understand it, and that goes through our customer service department. And we'll talk more about why that is in just a few moments. The last one is the Quality Improvement Organization. They do some prepayment, discharge, and some other reviews, so we want to make everyone aware of that. I was asked a question about a contractor that's not listed on this slide, so you might want to take note of this. There is a contractor called the UPIC, UPIC, Unified Program Integrity Contractor. This contractor does fraud, waste, and abuse investigations. So if you're referred to them, the situation is that something's going on. We would do that if you've been with us and you've gone through the targeted probe and educate and you haven't fixed the problem. We would refer to CMS, and CMS may refer you to the UPIC for more of an investigative purposes. I'm not really sure what the person that asked the question was looking for beyond that, but please know that yes, it is a contractor identified overpayment. The UPIC will instruct us to take money back. So we will enter into an accounts receivable situation, which will prompt the system to send you the letter explaining that. You're not sure what you want. So if there's more that you want, please let me know. I'm just not sure where to go with that one. We do want to remind everyone that a provider can self-identify, or a provider can say, hey, we found an overpayment that should be taken back. And the providers can do incorrect billing. They can definitely look at payer information, which is when there's a primary payer. Now, I will tell you that sometimes one provider identifies something that should have had a primary payer and maybe doesn't, or has the potential when they bill that way, and that will affect all provider claims submitted. That's because we have to investigate. Now, I say we as in the bigger Medicare program. WPS does not complete this investigation. It is the Benefit Coordination and Recovery Center. Two things will happen. One, it will stop claims from paying in the future, but any claim that is paid, we will take money back. And now you have to do a couple of things. One, do an appeal to say this isn't related to a primary insurance. We're not there yet. Two, get the primary insurance corrected, or a variety of other things. Okay. So we'll talk more about that. Providers also may identify that it's a Medicare Advantage plan and say, ooh, this patient should have been enrolled in this Medicare Advantage plan. This happens when the Medicare Advantage plan hasn't updated the system yet. We know they have one, but it just hasn't updated it yet. So now we have to get this taken back because we know it's coming. And then again, Medicare secondary payer information. So lots going on with what a provider can do. One of the questions that was asked of us is if a provider identifies an overpayment, what is the best way to notify Medicare? If the overpayment is involving the um, system or involving something and you're like, wait, I'm trying to do a cancellation, I'm trying to correct a claim and it keeps going back into the system. This would be for the FIS system or the physical intermediary standard or shared system, which is a UB04 claim form or an 837I. There is a paper claim form that you can do with an overpayment. Sometimes what happens is that by identifying it as an overpayment and you have to remove information or do something with it, you actually make the claim return to provider like you have to fix this. Well, you are trying to fix it, only the system can't process it because it's missing this key piece of information. And what do you do? That's where we ask that you have to fall back to the paper claim form. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit as we get down into it. So there's a lot that the provider has to be aware of. Now, if you are billing on a CMS 1500 claim form or an 837P electronic transaction, you can do a clerical error reopening in some cases, but in a lot of cases, you are going to have to do either the self-issued refund or you're going to have to ask us to take money back. And those are all done with forms that are on our website. We're going to get into that when we get into that section. So I'm hoping that I hit all of those questions. There was quite a few submitted in that area, and I don't want to skip any of them. I was asked if there are times when a federal entity will, and I believe this person in particular was talking about the second one, which is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And the answer is yes. This is a law enforcement review. Law enforcement reviews are commonly done for um, fraud, abuse, etc. So when we look at this, a lot of these are going to be done through that process. Okay. But what other types of federal entities could be involved? When you hit level 3 of an appeal, it is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They use an administrative law judge, which would be part of this judicial review, and there's two different steps to the judicial review. That ALJ is under the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The Department of Health and Human Services, which would be a level 4 appeal. And then again, the federal district courts, which is another form of a judicial review, is a level 5 appeal. So when we look at the appeals process, 1 and 2 are contractors, 3, 4, and 5 are federal entities, and each one is built upon each other, and you can request an overpayment. Or I'm sorry, you can request an appeal on any overpayment that was identified by like a provider or the system or other things like that. I think one of the more interesting ones that people find interesting is that our system has built-in edits that have nothing to do with a person. This is simply called an unsolicited response, and this overpayment starts off with claims processing. The claims processing systems, there are two of them, and you've heard me mention them, but I want to remind you what they are. FIS, the Physical Intermediary Standard System, which processes a UB04 or an 837I, and MCS, the Multi-Carrier System, which processes a CMS 1500 or an 837P. Both communicate with something called the Common Working File or CWF. The Common Working File has built-in edits. They are national edits that are built by the system maintainer. That means that we, as your Medicare administrative contractor, we don't have anything to do with it. But those communication edits do go out to things like high class, or which is, I guess, the easiest way to call it the accounting system. I'm not going to get into the full technical name for it because everything has an acronym. So we'll just call it the accounting system. The Common Working File, or CWF, communicates to that based on claims coming in. And let me give you an example. The first thing it looks for is to say, hey, is there an outpatient claim for services that should have been included in an inpatient claim? This does not count most professional services, but does count most technical services or facility side services. So it'll automatically take the money back for that type of a service. It has nothing to do with us. We don't even have anyone assigned to it. The system just builds it and sends a letter to you saying you owe us money for this. If you disagree, that's where the overpayment questions can come in, and also where you want to do the appeal on the overpayment. Okay. So someone asks, why don't I have someone within overpayments to contact? Well, the answer is, what do you do with this unsolicited response where the system is the one building it? We haven't assigned it to anyone. There's nobody there. That's why you go to customer service and they have to work through the process, because one of the first steps they have to do is to establish whether it was something that was identified by a contractor, the patient, whether it was something the system identified. That's part of what customer service is very quickly trying to do for you, which is why you're going to go to them when it comes to overpayment responses. Oops, I'm so sorry. Um, I was asked just in general, what type of actions can you take on an overpayment? So I'm hoping this will get you what you need. First and foremost, you can agree with the overpayment. If you do, please return the money. You can do that in paper check. You can do that on our system, and we'll talk more about that. You can do a rebuttal. Now, a rebuttal is simply a letter saying, I intend to do this, which could be an overpayment, or it could be, I intend to return the money. A rebuttal, which you do have 15 days to do, doesn't stop anything from happening. It's just what your intent is. Is a rebuttal required? No. I'm not sure where the person is getting that the rebuttal is a required step. It's an optional step. Okay. Um, could you do an appeal? And the answer is yes. And there's two different time frames associated with an overpayment appeal. Remember that you have 120 days to file the appeal. So let's say that you simply say, I agree with it. I don't want to have interest applied. I don't want to deal with that. So here's my money. And then you say, okay, I did that within the first 30 days, so my interest doesn't start applying at 41. We'll get more into that process in just a little bit. I do have a link to Jennifer that's going to talk through the timeframes and kind of show you some of that stuff that may help you. All right, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you do it within the first 30 days, we will not start the overpayment process, which is the actual take back. Take the money back. That will automatically begin. We're going to hold that until that first level one appeal decision is done. But it doesn't mean interest doesn't apply. If we uphold our decision, we will continue to apply interest. So the provider asks, why do you apply interest? Because it's still a debt owed to Medicare. You did have the option to pay it back, okay, which means that interest will not be applied within the first 30 days, and still you can do the appeal. No one's saying you can't do the appeal. There's just going to be a lot more back and forth. It's up to you. The good thing about that 30-day time frame, and a lot of you guys may hear it referred to as a section of the law, but we're going to call it the 30-day time frame for this one. That particular type of an appeal will stop the back and forth. If we overturn our overpayment decision, you just simply keep the money. So it really just depends on what it's for and why you got it. Okay. So hopefully that answers the different actions that you can take. We were asked, of course, as always, there were some questions about how to identify an overpayment. And this is where we're going to go through the process and then some of the resources. So first, um, I'm going to go ahead and move on. We're going to talk about the process, but I wanted to bring up this booklet for you. Now, keep in mind, this booklet is on the CMS website. It's a Medicare overpayment booklet. You can see the little link down here on the bottom of slide 13. I did ask Jennifer to put this link actually in the chat for you. So you can get there however you want. I'm going to go ahead and select this link. We're going to wait, and then Jennifer's going to verify for us that it actually opened. But again, I'm waiting for it to open. And Jennifer, can you verify that the booklet is able to be seen?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to scroll down, and I'm just going to jump, through all the stuff I went through already, but I want to jump to page 7. I love this page because it actually talks to you day by day what you have to know, right? And it says, okay, on day 1, this is where we send it. What starts or is considered day 1? And it is the date on the overpayment letter, the demand letter. Now, I want to remind everyone we do have a few days on this where if we're mailing it physically as USPS, we do allow a 5-day kind of option after that, which is what this is saying here. All right, then the last day you can submit a rebuttal is on day 15. That's fine. Now, if between day 1 and day 15 you tell us, Tom, take our money back, we will do this day 16 immediate recoupment request. This means whatever claim processes between day 16 and day 30, we'll take all of that money, apply it under this overpayment until it's met, and not apply interest. Okay. You could also say every point going forward, just take our money back. We don't even want to have to deal with it. We're still going to send you the letter, which will start with day 1, but then we'll just automatically start taking money back, and that's an option. So you can see here's all the different steps, and I'm not going to read this to you. I don't want you to be unaware of that. So a couple of things. If you don't respond to anything, day 41 is when we begin to automatically take money back. We being the MAC, you owe Medicare money. It'll happen on day 41. Again, remember it's from day 1 to day 41. If it's not paid back, we do take time, get the money back or try to get the money back. But if it's not paid back, note that we will refer it to the Department of Treasury, and that's just the length of time. So then, they make decisions. So I do want to remind everybody that we are doing the best we can. Please note right here is the redetermination request. So if this happens, we will not refer you to the Department of Treasury. We need to complete this redetermination request. Also, that's the initial. If you want to do the reconsideration of the redetermination, again, we will not refer you to the Department of Treasury because we know that you're still in the process of it, and we'll do that for all 5 steps. I think that's what happened with one of the questions, and the reason that I say I think that's what happened, they said it's been 4 years and that they're with a judicial review. My assumption is if it's been 4 years, you're probably doing a battle through the court system, and we're not saying it's like right or wrong. We're saying, hey, you're using your appeal rights, which winds up in 2 different sets. One is an administrative law judge, and the second one is what? District court. The district court will put you onto their roster when they can. So we don't really know how long that's going to take. No one does. So I have a feeling that's what's going on. Now, again, it wasn't specific enough to me to really answer that question. That is solely speculation, but hopefully it does help you through. Okay. So just read through this chart. I love this booklet and that it does give this to you, and it really will help you through understanding the process if you're not familiar with it. Okay. Highlight just a couple of things. One, I kept saying the letter is what starts it. So what are the parts of the letter that are important? First and foremost, the reason is always contained. Why are we taking money back? The system does generate some of these letters, which means I don't manually type anything in, neither does anyone. It's the system saying, hey, here's a program to edit. If it hits this, put this reason into the letter, but send the letter out. That's why you have to go again through customer service. They will look at that generated generated request and see what's going on. There's no person behind it at this point. Not until at least you're involving customer service. The letters also tell you how much money is due and how the system came to that amount. So We opened an accounts receivable saying you owe us $1 million. That $1 million is over 41 claims. Each one of those claims, that's how the system's going to come up with this generated amount. Remember, it's not always just one claim. It could be multiple claims for multiple patients, and the system, or the, I'm sorry, and the letter will identify that. The letter will also explain your rights and obligations. What do I have the right to do? Such as you can appeal this, or you can pay this back. It's going to tell you what, as a provider, you have rights and obligations and what's important for you to know. As I stated, it will tell you the claim or claims affected. And then it's going to tell you the interest rate in application if that interest rate were to apply. So if you say, wait a minute, but I got it paid in 15 days, there is no interest rate applying. Though had you not had it paid, we would have started interest on day 31. And that's where it's going to tell you, here's what the current interest rate is, and here's how much that will go into it. So it's the interest rate plus the application. How do we apply that interest, etc. Time frames, all of those. So a lot of information comes from within that letter. One of the pieces of information on every letter that we send, I'm going to give it like 3 different names in order to answer the questions that y'all sent in because you didn't give it one consistent name. Somebody called it the DCN or document control number. Somebody called it an ICN or internal control number. Another person called it a identification number. So whatever one you want to use there, on the letter we will have a number. That document control number is actually part of the process, and it contains what we need to access our system. When you contact customer service for help in understanding anything, please make sure that you have that number available. It will help us identify what you need. And by us, it's not me, it's not Jennifer, it's not anyone on my team, it's customer service. But by giving them that information, they're not trying to track through the processing system. They're not trying to track through the accounting system. You can imagine if we're trying to track through any of those systems, how long it's going to take for us to find what we need. So please make sure you have that number available. And we want to make sure that we can get you the best possible service we can. And that's to give us a certain number and ask the questions as related to that number. Okay. I do want to put together just a couple of fast reminders on each one. Um, Again, you can request a couple of things. The immediate recoupment, which is a form of communication in written communication to the MAC. What are you asking us to do? You are asking us to immediately start taking money back on one overpayment or on every overpayment. One or every one, it just depends on how you complete that form. I will tell you, yes, we will take a written thing, but it has to have very specific elements, which is why we say, don't just write it yourself, use our form. Don't miss any of the elements, because if you miss the elements, it doesn't apply correctly. We want to make sure you get what you want out of it, so that's why we developed a form. We're going to take a look at those forms in just a little while. I do want to remind everybody that there is, again, 2 time frames for overpayments. Requests for a refund. Overpayment requests for a refund, or I'm sorry, a redetermination. Of course, it's a refund request, right? It's the redetermination of the overpayment. And so one is 30 days, and that's to stop us from taking money back. You don't agree with it. You don't want us to take money back until such time as a decision is made. 30 days, again, does not stop interest. But you could pay us back and still request it up to 120 days. Either way, even if we're not taking money back, we will begin to apply interest on day 31. A couple of more fast reminders. The day 120 is the last day to file a redetermination. Even if we're not applying interest, even if you've already done, it is the last day to file that redetermination. This is the same as a claim redetermination. The thing to note with this redetermination is that you do specifically need to state overpayment. Please do not state claim. It is two different things. So I want to remind everybody of that. All right, let's move on from that. Let's talk a little bit about returning money to Medicare. Here's where I'm going to jump out, and I will show you some different forms and items like that, because I think it's important that you do see some of these different items. So you do have, first of all, a refund, and I'm just going to jump to the website for this so that you can kind of see a little bit, because the refund gives you some different options. So the first option is that offset. Now, that offset information, that immediate offset, is available on our website. I always recommend, if you're going to look for it, best way to do that is first make sure you're in this section on the top, which is Part A or Part B. And you heard Ashley talk about this if y'all attended the last one, but we want to make sure you're getting it right. J5 Part A equals Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and our providers across the nation who have home offices or election offices who have elected that contract. Now that's a line of business. So those claims are processed on a UB04 or A37I institutional transaction. Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, you have J5 Part B as well, and those are CMS 1500 or 837P, line of business, Part B. J8 is for Indiana and Michigan, same Part B and A breakdowns. So hopefully all that makes sense. But if you don't want to look at all this and you're like, oh, where did he say to go? Go ahead, go to the first right up in the top, use your tools, drop it down, go ahead and hit all tools, slide down. What you'll see is all forms on the left side. And if you have it open, depending on the size, you may see a list of 2x2, 1x1, or you will see the three that I have open. I'm just going to go to the third item on the left side column. For me, it's called all forms. Here you've got a variety of different forms you can use. And so I can do things like claims corrections, I can do an appeal, I can do a variety of different actions, and you just want to go through. Okay. Immediate recoupment, we've already talked about this, so we just want to remind everyone, this is where we automatically start taking money back on day 16. This is where you're going to get that information. Overpayments, here's where you can actually request that we take money back, or you can ask a question on overpayment, depending on what's happening here. Let me just show you what I was talking about when you flip the line of business. So you've got that. If you flip it open, you come back down and you say, oh, I have overpayments. Did you notice that these go to Part B versus Part A? And you want to make sure you're opening this up. You want to make sure you're doing that. So there's a variety of different forms to help you through the process. It just depends on what step you're on. What are you looking for? I was asked about refunding, and not that you don't agree that you owe the money, but what happens if you agree that this is going to be too much to pay back? Is there a way to do that? And the answer is absolutely. Let me remind you that if you say, hey, I just simply can't afford this right now, it's not that I don't owe you the money, it's that by giving you all of the money back at this moment, it's going to cost us a lot of money. That is what is referred to as an extended repayment schedule. You can give us up to 3 years to repay this money on a schedule. When you send in an extended repayment schedule, you do still need to give us the number of the overpayment. We talked about that document control number. You need to put that on there. You need to give us the initial payment and then specify how much you're going to pay for each month so that you're done within 36 months. If you say I need more time than 36 months, please note that we must go to CMS to get final approval on that. So it's a little different when you're looking at all those different pieces of information, but I hope that that does help you. No one is set. We are not trying to cause you harm or any other thing with that. The information on the extended repayment schedule is on slide 19, and it is just exactly what it sounds. I need more time than 90 days or whatever to get this payment to you and to get done. Now, I will tell you that just because you're giving us an extended repayment schedule does not waive interest. I got a whole rant from someone in the registration process. The issue that they seemed to be having when I went through and tried to read it out was that they had done this request and yet they still had interest apply. That is normal. You must pay it back within 30 days if you don't want to pay interest. What I'd like to do now is just move on and we'll answer a few questions. And some of these will require the use of the website, but oops. So extended repayment schedule, we already went through that. If you are interested, we do have another section open and it's the question and answer period. So anything I don't get through right now, you can register for the question and answer period, which somebody mentioned that they couldn't locate this on our website. So very simply, come to the WPS-GHA website, go to the training center, and then go to the live events. Look down the chart. You'll see today's sessions listed. Go down a little bit more, and you'll see clear the winter haze. That's what you're looking for. Okay, so the questions that I didn't get to today, which I do know were quite a few, or actually all of them that were submitted, I will move them into this session. So you do have to register and attend that session should you like your answers. I just want to verify with Jennifer, did we have any questions that came in via the chat?
I do not see any questions as of yet, Tom.
Okay, perfect. If we do have anything that comes in the chat or whatever was pre-submitted, I'll get those added and we'll get those talked about during the next session. Okay. If you wouldn't mind for me, on every session we ask you to take a survey. This survey goes to CMS. It's their way of seeing how we did. One is a MAC, like how do we process claims overall? What do you think? There's going to be a question on that. There's also going to be information on the specific session, me as a presenter, the PowerPoint, the websites, all those different things. So please feel free to take that survey. We will ask that you give as much feedback as you can. All right, I had Jennifer put the link in the chat. I'm going to give you an opportunity when we close the session. You're going to get a little pop-up box that's saying, hey, I want you to go here. That's what this is going to look like. It's going to have the little triangle, all that on the right side. If you're taking this via an encore, which is what we'll do with the recording, you will be given a little picture, which you can use to take the survey. Last, we're also going to send you a follow-up email. Now, the follow-up email also contains a certificate of achievement, but it's going to contain a link to the survey. So just a lot there with that. Again, that follow-up email will come in just a few minutes. Please don't delete it. Did everybody catch that? Don't delete it. Open it up, look at it. It's got your certificate within it. Also, if you called in and you are not on the email, which means you did not register your email for this session, you need to email us. And the email address is wps.gha.education@wpsic. In this subject line, put Overpayments webinar. In the body, say, hey, I would like to get a certificate and I called in, and then give us your 10-digit phone number. I need that to issue you the certificate. I have to be able to verify you or not. All right. We will also post this presentation to our Encore page, which will allow you to look at the Encore without going to YouTube. Now, again, that's going to be posted between 60 and 90 days, but it will remain in YouTube for as long as it's valid. So thank you for listening, Jennifer, and I really do appreciate it. On behalf of WPS, we hope that you will attend the rest of today's sessions and you'll get some more information. Don't forget to take that survey. You may now disconnect.